we'll kick off.
Right, let's do it.
That.
My God, okay.
Well, my guest today is Sharon Malloy, and you're the founder of the Willow Community Counselling Centre.
That's it.
And that's in Athy.
It is.
Are you local to Athy?
Well, originally my father was from Maganey.
Was he?
So, yeah. I was raised in the UK, as you can probably tell. But I'm here about 27 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that. Like, well, I live in Maganey, and my home place is Maganey. And when I was advertising us having a chat, you know the image I did with the your image, my image,
Yes,
and then
yes.
I said that looks an awful lot like my auntie from the UK, and you even speak like her. Funny
Oh
enough.
my goodness.
But my dad didn't even hear you speak. And he said that's very like my sister, and he sent a photo of his sister. I must show you afterwards.
That's mad.
I actually put an image up for when people are looking back at it side by side. You know,
Yeah.
it's quite interesting because you even sound like her, which is mad.
That's a bit crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, undercover job here.
Exactly.
Well, you're Maganey, but you want to give a bit of a background of yourself briefly anyway.
Yeah.
So what brought you to England and what brought you...
Oh, I was born in England, so
Okay.
my dad would have moved over in the 50s, as a lot of Irish people did. But my mother, who's English, so we were all raised in the UK. And then my parents moved back, I think, late 80s, early 90s, maybe late 80s. And then when I had my first daughter, that was what brought me back.
Okay.
I mean, I would have been here for holidays, you know, my grandfather, my grandfather, and all that type of thing. And then once my parents moved back, well, then I was here a lot more. And at the time, it was just a night. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't now, but there was a bigger divide between the UK and Ireland. You know, children could be children. So it was to bring, to have my children here so they could have a childhood.
What do you mean there was a divide?
Well, I had a friend that had children the same age, and we had children at the same time. And their children just grew up much quicker because, they lived in a town and just, like little things, like at 12, the girls would be into makeup, where when my girls were little, at 12, they'd been playing in the field. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So they grow up faster in England?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And I think there was more tolerance here for children as well. You'd go to Super Quinn when it was here, and everyone would chat to you. They'd chat to your child.
Yeah.
Or in the UK, they'd just ignore your child, you know. So, I mean, I'm nothing against the UK.
Yeah, there is cultural differences, you mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether there's such a big difference now. I don't know.
Well, it's funny you say that. I went across with my brother about 2 years ago, maybe even 3 now, and we were going to see a show, and when we landed there, we got a bit of food, and we said we'd go just on the outskirts of London into a pub and, see what the bit of crack was, whatever. And everyone was sitting down, and we went up to the bar, and I spoke to the barman and wasn't interested.
Yeah.
So either was the guy beside me. And I went to the next pub and the same thing, and I thought it was so different because, like, if you're in anywhere, Carlow or Dublin or anything like that, the barman or the people beside you, they're all kind of relaxed and, they'll have a laugh,
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not putting it down either, just maybe it's a cultural difference. And maybe that's why people always say, oh, Irish, they're so friendly and all.
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
it's just the culture of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember going to one of those, what are they called, Beef Eater or something, restaurants in the UK, which were child friendly, and you had your little high chair. And, I wasn't being particularly loud, just being a child. And the dirty looks, and I'm thinking, but this is meant to be a child friendly restaurant.
No.
It wasn't like I went to, I don't know, somewhere, high end.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah. So I came backwards and forwards for a year, and then we decided,
Okay. So you decided to stay.
So
to Athy.
Where did I move to first? I lived with my parents for a while, and then we moved to Fighting Cocks, and then I moved back closer to Maganey. So I'm in Ballymoyla now.
Okay, very good. It's very close by.
Yeah, very, very.
So tell me, why addiction? What brought you on this path?
Well, it was trauma first. Do you really want to know how I got into it? It's a very strange story.
Yeah. We're all about strange stories.
Okay, so when I was in London, I worked corporate, I was an exec assistant, CEOs, mainly hotels. And then when, I had my first daughter, we decided I was going to stay home and raise them. So that, moved here, and that was that really. And then I had no intention of doing the work I'm doing. I had trained in reflexology, so I was a reflexologist, so I suppose it was about holistic aspect. And then a series of things happened to me. One, I had a very bad car accident, which when I went to empty the contents of the car, they were looking at me in amazement because they assumed the person had died.
Wow.
The crash was that bad. It was a head-on collision. I had a blowout. I had my daughter in the car actually at the same time. We were both fine. Fine.
Mm.
And then...
It's a strange thing to walk away from something like that then.
Yeah. And so then I just carried on. And then I got struck by lightning.
Struck by lightning?
Actually got struck by lightning, yeah. I think the chances of getting struck by lightning are, which way is it? You have a better chance of winning the lotto than getting struck by lightning. Of course I had to get struck by lightning.
Pretty amazing. And a car crash. That's two pretty severe things. And
again my daughter was with me. I had her in the bath, and it was the day Princess Diana died. I had her in the bath. Luckily I was outside the bath and I was just rinsing my hair. So I was standing over the bath rinsing my hair while she was in it. And it must have hit the water pump. That's all I can think of, because it travelled up the water.
Wow.
So I had the shower fortunately over my head, because Annie was obviously in the water, I was outside of her. And it just lifted me off the ground. Yeah, it was... So a little
You survived that?
I did. A little bit disjointed for a couple of days, or disconnected, whatever. And then shortly after that, I'd read the Nash List, as you do, not threw it, but put it down on the kitchen table. And then I happened to walk past, and there was this advert by the Red Crisis Centre in Cardiff looking for people to train. And I thought, okay. It kind of jumped out at me. Okay. And I thought, no, I don't really want to do that. I thought, okay, I'm listening. A car accident, struck by lightning. Okay, I'm listening. What do you want me to do? And I wouldn't be a particularly religious person, but it was just...
Signs.
Yeah, so off I went, not expecting to be accepted. I was.
And this was in Carlow?
Yeah, it was at the time, Daphne Hunt, amazing woman. She had founded it herself, absolutely amazing. And she did the 2-year training, her and Una Travers, her colleague. And it was fantastic training, I have to say. And so that was how I got into counselling initially. And then it was through my work in trauma that I identified the link between trauma and addiction.
Okay.
So then I went and trained in addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So that was how I ended up where I am.
But you became the founder of your own place.
Yeah, I was doing some volunteering work in Athy, saw the great need, for a service. And I think I went to Athy about 2015. And then the people I was working with, that folded. There were a few issues there. And I was left with, I think, about 8 clients at the time. And I couldn't get anyone to take them on because, I didn't have an organisation. I wasn't attached to anything. Because they had folded. So it was just kind of happened organically, I suppose. Yeah. And one thing led to another. I wouldn't abandon them. So I stayed working with them in a voluntary capacity. And one thing led to another. And then in 2018, we established Willow. And then we had very, very little funding. It was a challenge to get any money. As I said, a lot of it was voluntary. Mm-hmm. We do get funding from the HSE. It's not enough, but we're very grateful for what we do get. Yeah. We recently moved to a new premises. So we have a lovely house. The Methodist Church have been very kind to us with the rent. So we pay rent, but they have been very generous. And it's a lovely house, so we now have myself, I have another counsellor, I have a reflexologist, I have a yoga teacher. We're in the process of putting together a sensory garden that we got HSE funding for. Right. So it's kind of
so it's a bit of a holistic centre in itself.
Absolutely, which is what I always wanted, because it is about teaching it is about working with the person as a whole. 1 hour a week's not enough. Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to know them, I guess, inside out, and I suppose you're getting to know them. Like I seen it, I think it was like 4 C's with addiction. and I think it was compulsion, craving, and then it was consequence and then control.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to wrap my head around that. Maybe it's the stages, like 4 stages of grief.
Yeah, absolutely. But for me, I think because I came in via trauma, well, the trauma is the reason. There's a reason for addiction. Addiction's the coping mechanism. Do you know? It's the addiction is the behaviour. It's not the person.
Yes.
It's what they do. It's not who they are.
Okay.
But so often, you know, their identity becomes so wrapped up in what they do that, you know, lose sight of there's a person here.
That's interesting. Tell me, you know, in terms of clients who become addicted, would you call them clients, or would you call them?
Clients.
Yeah. How much of addiction is trauma? Are you talking 100%, 90%? Is there some people who are genetically disposed to it rather than their past?
Yeah, I don't buy the genetically disposed argument personally. I know people do, but for me, you know, let's imagine your grandfather, and the grandfather was sexually abused as a child, and he then develops his coping mechanism becomes alcohol. So with alcohol, he becomes very abusive. Physically now, not sexually. He then becomes physically abusive to his children. So then we're now on to another generation. So then the way that this generation copes then is through drug use. And now this then has an impact on their children. So I think the trauma is what's at the bottom of that.
Okay.
Do you know? And it's different ways of coping with the trauma. And no, not everyone who has suffered trauma turns to drug use, absolutely not. They find different coping mechanisms. Some are healthy. I mean, we have a workaholic, for example. Well, that's seen as a positive.
Yeah.
Because it's still a form of addiction, really.
And is it a workaholic? Would that be kind of like an addictive personality? Or is that something that you're kind of not too...
I don't buy into that either.
Okay.
Because it's a coping mechanism. It's a coping, it's a form of coping behaviour. That if they're working all the time, well, their head is probably pretty busy, they're pretty distracted, so then they don't have to feel.
Yes.
If your head is constantly busy, you're not going to feel. And it's an avoidance of emotion. Yeah, Dapamati puts it very well. It's like, it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain. You know, we have to look underneath the addiction.
Yes.
Because if we don't, well, you know, we have the stigma, the person is judged. It just makes, as a society, we're all impacted by addiction. And if we continue to stigmatise the person in addiction, you know, it's such a fine line, because when you say, well, you know, they need compassion, and then it's, oh, you know, if you've been mugged by someone, well, sure, you're not probably going to feel very compassionate. I fully understand that. But at the end of the day, people in addiction, they have suffered trauma, and that isn't fully recognised, in my opinion.
And I guess is the issue when the trauma happens, the intervention comes too late. You know, like a lot of people I know, I was doing an informed trauma course at the start of the year for my own job, and it was dealing with people who have been through trauma and how to approach them in a more friendly and positive way. To be prepared that everybody might have trauma, you don't know. So it was like, they say that, you know, to the degree it's probably different, but they say everyone has 4 or 5 really traumatic things in their childhood. Obviously there's certain things like sexual abuse and physical abuse that not everyone goes through. But is the intervention coming way too late to stop these people down the road from relying on substances to fill that void?
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine, I've got quite a number of clients that would have started using a substance from, say, 12, some younger, but on average 12. And from 12 to 16, that's when you learn to regulate your emotions. So if you regulate your emotions with a substance from 12, well, then you don't learn how to self-regulate. So it then becomes very difficult. So what happens for the person, you know, when they then have a stressful situation as an adult, because it can feel the same, they can feel threatened, they go into fight or flight. Basically, in a very simplistic form, they revert back to their child self.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have a 12-year-old trying to deal with a very adult situation,
Mm-hmm.
and they become frustrated. And then, because, let's say, as a child with abuse, quite often they're powerless, children are powerless anyway, but in an abusive situation.
But the easy victims, I think.
Yeah, they're completely powerless. So say something happens in their daily life where they're not powerless like they were when they were a child, but it feels the same, right? So there's this, and they tense, they go into fight or flight, they feel powerless, and then the way the brain works, because of the fight or flight, the thinking brain now switches off. The brain now can't tell the difference between present and past, so now they're suddenly this little boy. And so often, and not to generalise, but quite often with men it goes to anger.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they go to anger, well then they're no longer feeling powerless. And then we then create drama, chaos. So now we're getting further and further and further away from the feeling of powerlessness. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Mm-hmm.
So it's a protect. And obviously, I'm not condoning violence or aggression or anything.
We can see where it develops to that stage.
Yeah, but we need to understand.
And just on that then, say, what is the demographic have you seen? Is there more men in addiction centres? Is there more substance abuse from men because of reasons like that?
You see, I think for men who have been sexually abused, it's very difficult to disclose that. But a lot of, a large percentage of men in long-term addiction, yes, there is some kind of serious abuse. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
is it a 50-50?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, because I do have quite a split 50-50 with my own client base, but not everyone comes to me for addiction. It's general mental health, but yeah, there's a high percentage of abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of, even when you think of homelessness, the faces you see, maybe seems to be, not that it matters really, but I was just trying to make that connection from when you said from men where it turns to anger, or substance abuse. I know men, the suicide rates are astronomical. I think it's the leading cause of death between 18 or 12 and 35-year-olds.
Yeah.
And even this week, to 40-year-old, I know, not that I know personally, but through, people. But it's an awful shame, because I think, you're right, there is a stigma attached to walking into one of these places. Yeah. But I find a lot of people blame men on, men, they won't go to the doctor, men, they won't get it. But it's probably not great to blame the people who are the victims of it either. I know, how do we change that? Do we restructure our society, or...
Well, I think if society could have a better understanding of addiction, rather than working in blame, well, why? Why does that person need to take a substance to be normal, or to escape, or and even with the suicide, so often it's not that they want to die, they just want it to stop.
Yes.
They have the PTSD, they have the flashbacks, they then feel overwhelmed, as they would have as a child. And again, we have the same way the central nervous system works, so they're constantly feeling overwhelmed, which for a man, it's frightening. For anyone it's frightening, but for men, then they tend to then use violence.
Yeah, it is. And turning to substance, what is the most common or the worst kind of effect, or which one has the worst effect?
Well, I would have worked, so I worked with, cannabis, cocaine, heroin, and now we have crack. It's right everywhere, it's in the thigh, it's everywhere. And a lot of the long-term heroin users I work with, they tend to be more predisposed to crack. And crack is a very, well, they're all dangerous substances, but with crack the high is very intense and very short. And a number of clients that are in long-term heroin use now are having a bigger problem with the crack than they are with the heroin.
Okay.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think it's I think the split is quite even between male and female with the crack as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I've noticed in the last maybe 10 years, if even, from going out and socialising, is, you already know where I'm going with this, is that in every pub you go to, there seems to be cocaine rampant.
It's everywhere.
You go to the toilet, there's someone standing at the cubicle while his friend finishes, and then they swap around. And I've heard my father going into publican, and he said, "Do you know what they're doing in there? You're not getting them out." And he says, "Well, if I get them out, they'll go next door, they're doing it, and I lose my customers." So they can't even tackle it, and they don't want to tackle it because it's everybody, and it's, well, not everybody. It's there's so many, it's so commonplace.
It's very normalised.
Yeah.
Not even bats an eyelid.
And it used to be, I remember they used to call it a business drug, you know, years ago, or not even that long ago, 15 years ago, you know, where, no one bats an eyelid kind of thing. And I've heard of pubs not far away that they do it out on the counter. And again, the barman's afraid to send them off because they go next door.
Yeah. But it's so commonplace now.
Yeah.
And there are people that can use cocaine as, you know, people can have a glass of wine. There are people that can do that.
Yes.
But it tends to be the people that have very traumatic pasts or some form of trauma less likely to be able to do that.
How do you tackle something so common and widespread? Are we too late to tackle that? Have you missed the boat?
Well, you'd hate to think that, wouldn't you? But I don't know. I would veer on the decriminalisation side personally.
Heavier sentencing, heavier.
Yeah, because what is the point? I mean, what is it? 80-90% of people in prison for drug use, and they can use drugs in prison. You know, the prison system is inundated. I think the Midlands has 2 counsellors, and it's so difficult to get counselling. It's not. I'm not saying it's the prison's fault because they only have 2 counsellors. You know, it's funding, and everyone has the same issue. But what is the point of locking someone up when it's a drug-related issue? The drug is the coping mechanism for the trauma. Wouldn't it be better to put them in a rehab and help them?
Yes,
and
there is legislation, I believe, coming in to try and gear it towards that rather than prison, I've heard.
Yeah, I think the Labour Party especially are heading that way. I don't think we have anything in stone as yet. There's a lot of resistance.
The problem as well is there's a national crisis of guards leaving the force.
Yeah.
And how do you police something that's getting more common when you're losing your policing staff? It's a scary thought.
It is.
Maybe that will help. The fact that the sentencing will be more geared towards getting them into these centres. Like, do we have enough of these centres?
No, we don't. We have one, I think, for young people from 15. The only one I'm aware of, Ashton Eshery, I've done some work with them. It's very good, but they have, I don't know, 12 beds maybe. We're very limited.
Yes.
Very limited.
Is that lack of funding?
I'd imagine it is.
Yeah. I know you don't want to say, but
it's like, you know, I mean, I'm not here to say the government, but they're in for, what are they in, 4 or 5 years? They don't want to do anything that's going to alienate their voters.
Yeah.
And everyone, you know, it's the perception and the lack of understanding around addiction is the problem, I think, you know. I remember when I first worked with the Rape Crisis Centre, and, you know, if you tried to do fundraising or anything, it was so difficult because it was like a dirty word. You know, sexual abuse, we don't want to talk about that. You know, and addiction is the same. Now, fortunately, with sexual abuse, we've moved on, we have a better understanding as a country.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be hopeful that the same can happen with addiction. You know, a lot of people now, we're all on the same hymn sheet, where historically, you know, addiction was a moral failing of a person. I think we are thankfully moving away from that. You know, we are beginning to see that it is the result of trauma.
Are there medicines that work? Or I know you said about the holistic approach that you. But are there medicines that work, or is there an addictive side and side effects from them medicines? Like, what is? I know you can't really say what is the one great form, because I guess each case might be different.
Yeah, it depends what your drug of choice is. I mean, cocaine, there isn't anything. You have heroin, you have methadone. Yes, it works if. Methadone works in a short term. I mean, if some people choose to be on long term methadone, that's a choice. But ideally, it's. What am I trying to say? It's that you work with someone maybe while they're on methadone, and then they go do the detox, and then they go into rehab. There's a process. So the methadone helps stabilise them, to get them stable, that we can do some work, and then they go do the detox, and there's a lot of support then through the detox, the residential detox, and then they go and do a residential rehabilitation program, and that does work. But a lot of people are very resistant to going on methadone, and I think because some people have been on it for years in a very high dose, and I think that sort of kind of gives it a bad name, and I don't know, but clients tell me it's more difficult to come off. But I'd say it's difficult if you're on it for a long time. But if you're on it for a matter of months, say 6 months, I don't think it would be that difficult. I don't know, because I've never taken it, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But just what I'm told.
Yeah. Sometimes I think we seem to have a lot of management drugs and not a lot of cure drugs, and you worry. Like, obviously, if things work in a short term and get you to the next step, then all the better. If they're a stepping stone or a supportive way. But you.
See, the drug is the safety net. The methadone is the safety net. It's all the safety net. I mean, I've worked with clients in active addiction, and what I have found, because a lot of people say, no, you can't work with people while they're in active addiction, and they can choose, obviously you can choose which way, what model you prescribe to. I work very much in harm reduction, and what I find with especially when there's sexual abuse, that this might sound a bit strange, but whilst they're in active addiction, they have the safety net of their drug of choice. And so if they disclose to me that they were raped as a child, they know that then they can go and escape from that with heroin, right? So, but the important part is we get the whole story out, right? So now we've got the whole story out, and they've survived telling it. So then the next step is then they go in and they do their detox. Because what can happen is, if you don't deal, this is why obviously it's important to try and get someone stable before they go in and do the detox or go into rehab. Because if you don't deal with the underlying problem, and then they go into do their detox, well then they've no drugs, and now they have this tsunami of emotion that they've been running from since they were 12. It's terrifying. But if they can get it all out on the table, and then they know they've survived it, they have their coping mechanism, and then the next step is then they go in and do their detox. They've no surprises, if that makes sense. They've already survived it. They know they can survive it because they've done it.
There's no dragons lurking under the carpet.
With everything out. Mm-hmm. And the reality is they have already survived it anyway, but because of the impact of PTSD, they're constantly reliving it. Mm-hmm. And that's why that's where the drug use comes in.
And drug use, I guess, is coping, and it's also helping forget and alleviate on a slightly temporary basis the feelings that bring them down. I know I've read before that if you're still getting emotional about something that happened more than 18 months ago, even, you need to write it down or go through it, because a part of you is still stuck there. Yeah. And I'm guessing that's what you're saying as well. And the frightening thing is going back there.
100%.
But your 4-year-old self is still there, and you need to go back to that and explore everything, even think about the things that you haven't thought about in years.
Exactly.
Because the mind's a powerful thing. I know of people who've forgotten massively traumatic things that come out in therapy,
Yeah.
And it's like the brain was protecting them.
100%.
Yeah. Have you come across much of that?
Not a lot, but I have come across it. But if you imagine, for very young children, they feel, their logical brain isn't developed until 7, 8 years of age. So they experience everything on an emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
So from a very young age, where there's trauma, they learn feelings aren't safe.
Mm-hmm.
So they learn coping mechanisms from a very young age. And, a child can't fight, they can't flee, so their only option is to freeze. So then that follows through then, that they have, not always with women, men too, that their state their protective state becomes one of being numb, and it's that frozen with fear. You have the procrastination then, and they can't get going with anything, and it's because they're just it's a nothingness, they don't feel anything. They're just, that's a horrible place to be.
Complicated creatures, I think, humans,
Oh, absolutely.
Would you think an animal would, animals sure go through trauma, I guess, but how complicated and detailed and affecting it is on humans now.
Yeah.
It's obviously different social.
100%.
But I know when you talk about we talk about the mental health side of it, and which obviously affects their physical health.
Yeah.
So does the substance abuse, obviously heroin and crack.
Yeah. Completely.
What about the spiritual health side of it? Is that anything that comes in as a factor, or?
I do have some clients who have turned to God, and they found that that's what's helped them through it. So I'll work with someone wherever they're at. I'd be more spiritual than religious myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't prescribe to let me cut that out.
A denomination, you mean, like you'd be even spiritual would be meditation or get in touch with their inner self.
Yeah, I work a lot with mindfulness,
Yes.
Because we have to quieten the mind.
Mm.
Okay, so let's say we have someone and they've been doing well, they've been drug free for a number of weeks, and then they use. And then the self-loathing they feel because they've used. So it's really important, and this thing is really important to understand, especially for families, because the families are so fearful. They don't want, Johnny to go back using, and now Johnny's had a slip, and they're so fearful. But what we have to understand, there will be slips because they're an addiction. There will be. That's their coping mechanism from such a young age. So we have to accept the slip. No. But this is such a fine line.
Mm.
So I'm not saying, go knock yourself out, that's okay. But we have to, that's where the learning is. We have to understand, okay, why did you slip? What was going on? What were your triggers? So they're more prepared the next time. Because what tends to happen, they have a slip, they feel like a failure, then they carry on.
Okay.
So it's about, okay, accept you've slipped, but that you don't have to carry on. Because what happens, say, with cocaine, so they keep using because, they don't want to come down, obviously, but they don't want to face the fact that they've slipped. But it makes a bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, if anyone slips, it's like, well, come in and let's talk about it. I'm not going to say, oh my God, you're a failure. It's like, okay, this is what happens.
Yeah.
We have to accept this is what happens, and how we're going to work on that to help you for the next time. Because there are going to be times when you're blindsided, or you're going to be overwhelmed, or, and it's about how can you change your behaviour if you don't understand it. So if cocaine addiction, any addiction, it's like automatic pilot. It's a reaction to avoiding emotion. So you're doing it automatically. So how can you change something if you don't understand why you're doing it? But once you begin to understand your behaviour, what the drug is giving you, why you're doing it, then comes choice. Let me do something different. Does that make sense?
Yes. And it's reminding me of a celebrity that passed away last week, Matthew Perry, from the Friends.
Yeah.
And I've seen a couple of his interviews that have been shared. And, he was an addict years ago, but I think he got through it, and he found God helped him. But he he said, and he was arguing with a host on TV about, he said, I'm in control for the first drink, and then I'm not. And this is when he was going through it. And he was talking about it as a disease, you know, it's alcoholism. Does someone ever come out with 100%? Does someone ever 100% come out of that recovery?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, are they always going to go forward? They can manage, they can cope, they found mechanisms, but the pull is always there. But they can now have built up coping mechanisms that they can reroute their mind to.
Yeah, I mean, what clients tell me is that once they understand their behaviour, and now let's say they have a slip and we've been working together for quite some time, they don't get this, it doesn't work the same way anymore, because they have the awareness. They have the awareness, this isn't actually going to change anything. And so, yes, I mean, I had someone, I think he'd been drug-free for about a year. He had a very conscious slip. He chose to use. He was having something very stressful. He chose to use, but he didn't carry on. And he hasn't used since. And I think we have to, accept that too. But we have to have honesty. But we have to allow that space for the person to be honest. And you see what can happen in families is, if you've someone in addiction, well, they take up everyone's attention, the worry and everything. And now that person becomes drug-free. Well, now we've no longer got all this drama and chaos. And so now family have to look at maybe their own issues. And unconsciously, they can maybe want to return. I know they don't want to return to the drama and the chaos, but the drama and the chaos has been their normal for so long that unconsciously they almost try and return to it, if that makes sense. So that's why, if you can work with the families at the same time as the person in addiction, then you can have great growth.
Especially probably a younger person still living from home.
Yeah.
I see in my work that people who come in looking for a ban order against their son, and the son is there consenting, and sitting in between the parents, and would stand up and say, look, I apologise, and the father might stand up and say he's the best guy in the world until he has a drink or two in him, and then he tears the house down. And he's saying, I understand that. And it's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde thing that he can't control, or maybe he hasn't developed the mechanisms, maybe he hasn't sought the right help.
Yeah.
And I do worry about, you're talking about you started your business in 2018, and COVID would have hit very soon after that. And mental health became a big thing then. I think there was a lot of people lost to suicide. Yeah. And I wonder if there's a lot of people who took to addiction while they were stuck inside, or they're out of jobs, because a lot of jobs are lost. And there's probably still a lot of people who are kind of new then to addiction, and they're probably at home secretly slipping, and I would put something to you then, if someone's frame of mind, maybe I'm trying to get out here, someone stumbled on this podcast. I'm a highly functioning addict. My money is secretly going on cocaine and drink every weekend. I'm addicted to porn every day. I'm on a downward spiral. But they're the only things I'm getting any pleasure from. How do I escape?
Well, it's looking at what is the drug fulfilling in you. What is it fulfilling in you? You have to understand why. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You have to understand what is it giving you. Because the drug's fulfilling something. And, people in long-term addiction, it's not giving me anything, I hate it. And they do genuinely hate it. But I do always think, but what is it giving you? What is it giving you? It's giving you something, or you wouldn't be doing it. Outside of that, obviously, you have the high and everything else, but it's escape. It's escape from emotions, escape from feelings, escape from everyday life, it's escape from reality. Because stressful situations for people who suffered any kind of trauma are very difficult. Because they revert back to the child. And, sometimes even say, oh my God, they're so childish. But they've reverted back to their child self. Do you see? And now we have the child trying to navigate an adult situation. And this is where the mindfulness comes in. Because if they breathe, and it used to be a running joke with a lot of my clients, oh God, here she goes with breathing again. But it's science. If you breathe, the amygdala in your brain switches off, the smoke detector, you can think logically, and you're no longer in fight or flight. So I would do a lot of work around breathing with clients, and they would all tell me, I'm doing the breathing, and I cope much better this week.
It's interesting you say that, because in the last few years, I guess it's more with social media and videos and professionals from all over the world to share, their way of doing things.
Yeah.
But like you talk about breathing, you talk about Wim Hof was someone who was important for you, still is, so people know what it is, and a lot of people do them kind of things themselves, like they do the cold water, they do the breathing, and it really does help.
Oh, 100%.
Even for, I found, if you're wrecked tired and your mind's not working right, you feel like you can't get enough water into, you're trying to wake up, the coffee's making you shaky, it's not.
Yeah.
But lying down, even if you can't sleep, and doing that breathing exercise, big inhales and exhales and holding it, it's supposed to reset your whole nervous system.
Oh no, completely. It's exactly what it does. And you see, people in trauma, their central nervous system is oversensitized. So they're constantly going into fight or flight without even realizing that they're doing it. But it's interesting with what you're saying about the ice bath, because it's an idea I'm thinking about at the moment. Actually, is I'm toying with the idea of putting together a cocaine recovery group, and we're in the middle of doing the sensory garden that we were fortunate enough to get funding for. So I'm considering putting in an ice tub to do at the beginning of the programme. So I'm playing around with the idea at the minute, but I've run it past a few clients and they all seem very interested in it. Because, cocaine gives you the dopamine hit for 20 minutes max. And sea swimming, I can't remember, is it 4 hours, 7 hours, or something like that?
It gives you a high for that long?
Yeah, dopamine, yeah. So I I'll hold my hand up, I haven't done the research yet, but I'm assuming the ice bath is going to do something similar. With the length of time you're going to have this dopamine hit.
Yeah.
So I think it would be perfect for people with cocaine addiction.
Yeah, because even for people who don't have addiction, the benefits they see, and you can imagine how much greater they'd be. Like I've heard that, people say you wake up absolutely wrecked tired, but you had your few hours. If you get a cold shower, as difficult as it is, and a few electrolytes, even salt water, and go out and put your bare feet in the ground for 20 minutes.
Oh, absolutely.
And it said your whole day will change from what it could have been.
Yeah.
And I do that a lot with grounding. I swear by it. And even we're talking about it, it's supposed to help with absolutely any inflammatory disease. Yeah. On top of, when I got into it was a couple of years ago when I first met Nick. And I came in to the house there and I did one of his body talks.
Right.
Around that time, every light switch I touched sparked. I was getting a shock off everyone. All my watches stopped at the same time. And I was doing a lot of work from home with computers and phone and all that, and just didn't understand the idea. And I was talking to a guy who was he worked for the White House for a few years. He was a biohacker, but he was like a biological cosmologist, I think he called himself, right? Which I never heard of. But he was biostacking. So he was saying, if you sun gaze and you ground yourself and you do this on top of it, he was, you're saying all these different things. Because even being on the sand is grounding, they say,
Yeah.
And I started doing it and I couldn't believe the difference. And combined with, I like listening to talking to different people because you take the breathing work, you can take the grounding, and I've taken the meditation from Nick here. Yeah. And when you're taking all these things in, all of a sudden, I think the medicines that people might be on might lessen, the pharmaceutical medicines. Yeah. When you say even cocaine as a substitute, it's so much shorter of a high. Yeah. It's just, but it's so much shorter of a high than you might get from sea swimming.
Oh, 100%.
It's the replacement for what we could find.
Yeah, but you see, you can't just take the drug away and put nothing in its place. Because the person's going to become overwhelmed. it's a process. So yes, there's a lot of work that has to be done, but they have to have tools to support them.
You see, I like what you're doing with your clinic there, because you're putting in them holistic tools that are becoming ever more important. Not that they weren't important, but ever more obviously important.
Absolutely.
Like I've seen people stand up on stage, take their blood before and after grounding, and it's all uniform after.
Yeah.
It's that they're settling and everything's running perfectly between cells. So it's interesting to me, that you were doing such a holistic approach, and I didn't know that centre. Maybe that's a common thing, is it? Or is it
Yeah,
not?
it is. We had someone, it's a client actually that wanted to do some fundraising, and well, okay, there's a reason behind it, I suppose. But anyway, she wanted to do fundraising, and so she was talking to a lot of people in a fine, and I didn't even know they were there. But initially, when we started, it was primarily addiction is what we worked in. And what was happening, so bear in mind we were having a huge battle with funding, but everything was word of mouth. So someone, Billy would say to Jack, and then Jack would get my number, he'd just ring me. It's very easy. You don't even refer, you just pick the phone up and talk to me. It's very straightforward. But because of the challenges at the time we were having with funding, we couldn't advertise because we were inundated anyway. About 80% of the clients are word of mouth. So I didn't dare advertise because I was afraid we would be inundated and we wouldn't have the funding. So I can't remember what your question was.
Let me ask you, what I asked, is it common that that a lot of centres would take an holistic approach?
Okay, I think more and more so actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'd refer a lot into Kandara, which is an HSC detox, excellent. And they would do a lot of meditations. A lot of them actually, to be fair, they start the day with either yoga, meditation. Yeah, it would be pretty commonplace actually.
How did you end up renting from the Methodist Church?
The house became available, and myself and another board member, we just thought this is going to. That's the other thing to do is auricular acupuncture as well, actually.
Auricular acupuncture.
Yeah, very good for cocaine cravings.
What is that, as opposed to?
The ears, so it's in the ears, yeah. And then we also do the craft, the community reinforcement and family therapy. So that's a 12-week program that you do with the parents or the loved one, the partner, to help them not only understand the addiction, but the impact the addiction's having on them. It's not counselling, it's a more structured program. But anyway, sorry, that came into my head. So no, we sourced this house, and yeah, we just loved it, and we weren't sure if we were going to get it, but it's just perfect. It's just perfect.
You answered a question that I was leading on from for the spiritual side of things, where you said you don't believe in God, but you're a spiritual person.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of one step older generation, there seems to be a fall off from there. And I think what I was thinking about it was that there seems to be what the Catholic Church have done to Ireland, and the scandals have created a trauma with that generation. Do you think that plays an effect on why you think that there wouldn't be a God?
I would imagine so. I struggle with I'm a Catholic, but I struggle with how they dealt with people who've been raped by priests. Just the whole way everything was handled was appalling.
And even mother and baby homes, and the cover up, I suppose, was very, whatever about holding your hand up and saying we got rid of them few people. There wasn't that. There was a power kind of. See, the priest used to. I know I don't remember this, but from what I've heard, the priest used to walk around different houses, and he was the Lord Mayor. They got the good china out, and the kids were hidden and told not to speak.
Yeah. But they were gods. They had so much control, and they had so much control over the education system.
Yes.
That their word was final.
And I've read on this before that my thoughts on it is that there are denominations of Catholicism. Well, no, Catholicism is a denomination of Christianity, let's say, and that organisation has done horrific things, as a lot of man-made organisations can do. And I feel as like maybe people have thrown the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to faith in, like when you look at some Christian doctrines, they would condemn anything like that, and there's a place for people like that, And I feel like the trauma of that has made people throw out the whole idea of God, because these people who represent, or should be representing God, have done the most heinous things. Do you think that could play a part in?
I don't know, because I have another client and horrific abuse as a child, and they haven't gone to a Catholic church, they've gone to an alternative church, but they found great support and solace and have been able to forgive their abuser. So I don't know. I mean, I think it depends on the person.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you do hear a lot of them stories where people have found, like I know a lot of people who have great faith. I have great faith. But I wouldn't call myself a Catholic. And I wouldn't have it since Catholic school. I would have diverted from it and found it in my own way.
Yeah.
And that would mean that I do believe in a God, and I kind of would have went down the evidential route of, well, something happened to me and I believe it to be true, and these signs, and like you said with the car accident or whatever, smaller versions of that, I think they hit my light. But I found that even looking into the human mind and consciousness, and the attempted Big Bang and all that, historical literature and hours of debates on both sides, concluding that there seems to be in the beginning something that you can lean on, and seems like it's listening when you speak by yourself, but it doesn't mean I'm sitting at the pew every weekend, because this mumbling and stand up and sit down, I think, was rolled in by probably the Roman Empire to control once they took over and to control people. And I think that the scars of that still run deep with people who are alive now. Not so much my generation, who, because teachers took over from the nuns and the Christian brothers, and I'm not saying all Christian brothers or all nuns were abusive, but anyone who's come into contact with a school like that or has been to a school like that knows exactly it's unfortunately. And I think that there is a lot of movement still from that. And maybe there's a lot of alcoholism from that, and maybe there's a lot of anger at God by saying, I don't believe in a God, but I think maybe the scars of that run deep that people don't want to face, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also hear that too, how can there be a God when, X, Y, and Z is been down to me,
Yeah, because we live in a fallen world, in a way. In some ways I put that down to the free will we're given, and the evil that people can choose to do. People can't be forced to be good, or there would be no free will, I suppose, isn't it?
It's a difficult one, isn't it?
It's a deep one too. Absolutely. But I read a study recently that I actually wrote it. The NYU Langdon Health said that the brain images now show that certain prayers reduce cravings in Alcoholics Anonymous people. They can scan it, and I would think that also other practices would help in the same way. I don't know any studies on that, but when we talk about meditation and how that helps us relieve stress, and I think kind of in the industrial and social media world we live in today, we've no time for, one, maybe faith in God, and two, holistic practices like meditation and grounding, and that seem to be geared towards that. It's purposely done, that we sit on our TV with a headache, we take a load of paracetamol. If we have pain, and I'm not running down every drug because it's some very effective drugs.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a pill for losing weight, you know, or surgery, you know, rather than are we losing self-discipline? Is that how, you know, is that what I'm trying to do?
Yeah, and then, I don't know, there's another interesting book by Rob Martin again, you know, When the Body Says No, and he's of the opinion that, well, if we don't deal with the emotion, it will come out in the body. So, you know, it's another...
Yeah, and I've heard that certain organs hold emotion. I think Nick would.
Yes, the liver is anger, I think, isn't it?
I don't know.
I think it's anger for the liver, yeah.
But you can see that, you know, when they say how music, we're 90% water, and how different music and frequencies affect water.
Yeah, Emoto, I can't think of his surname.
Yes, all I know is Dr. Emoto.
Yeah, I can't, his first name, sorry, I can't remember. But he's done a lot of work on that. You know, I mean, one of his studies, you know, is playing different types of classical music in these beautiful crystals.
Yes, it's
amazing.
amazing. They're like snowflakes that they come out.
But then if you're listening to, depending on what you're listening to, that's going to have an impact. You know, I bring that into the work as well. You've got to be, and what are you saying to yourself? You know, if you're constantly being very negative. I mean, IKEA of all people did a study with 2 plants, and they had, it was for, I mean, I can't remember, school children of whatever age, and they got the children to speak very positively to one plant, and then the other plant, you're ugly, you're this, you're that. And needless to say, the ugly plant, well, not that it was an ugly plant, sorry. The plant that was told it was ugly, because there were two plants that were identical, didn't obviously thrive. And
it's really interesting, isn't it? Like, from words. But words obviously have a tone and vibration. And I remember even, I know people have used that for growing marijuana. Years ago, I remember being in Foss, and there was a guy who grew his own marijuana, you know, and he had a shed. And before he left for the weekend to go training for his work week, he leaves the radio player on classical music, and this is about 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And what's that about? I couldn't believe the difference.
There's a horse trainer that does that as well.
As well?
There's a horse trainer.
Is there? Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think.
Yeah, they say cows and they produce more milk.
Yeah, and he plays classical music in the stables.
Yeah.
I can't remember which trainer it is.
You know, you wonder. You know, I think there's a guy, Andrew Hoodman. I might have got that wrong as well, but he's trying to list out the best morning routines, and I think we've gone through a few of them here. Like if you, on a Saturday, if you woke up a bit under the weather, you know, about maybe the cold shower and the breathing work. Yeah. Maybe the breathing work straight away.
Yeah.
Maybe the cold shower then, and maybe the bit of salt water and the grounding.
Absolutely.
While listening to classical music, you know, you'd wonder, doing that for your first hour of every day, how much different people would be. You know, would longevity be affected? You know, because stress is a massive part of that.
Huge.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I find even myself, you know, I play different types of music depending on my mood. You know, and some mornings I have classical, some mornings I have something, you know, a bit more upbeat, whatever. But I think, I think music can be very powerful.
Yeah.
You know, and even, you know, obviously music can go hand in hand with some drugs too. So, you know, people that are in recovery have got to be very careful what they listen to. Because if they listen to, say techno, and I have nothing against techno, but if techno was the music they listened to with their drug of choice, let's say, so there's an association, well then if they listen to techno, the body's nearly expecting the drug, you see what I mean?
Yes.
So that can be a huge trigger.
Yeah.
I mean, the senses can be huge triggers. Even, you know, if someone maybe was abused at the beginning of the summer, so then when you know, had the smell changed, or spring, or you know how the different seasons have different smells, and those smells can be very triggering.
Yeah.
For PTSD.
And you know, I think we're trying to do that here as well with the holistic approach to the wellness, and I think Nick does great work with all the different herbs and stuff I can't pronounce, never heard of.
Same.
Yeah, but but I'd much rather take that,
Yeah.
you know, and even the few practices, like even, I don't know, I was saying personal trainer here, but even as that, part of that would be grounding and meditating as part of a session, you know. And I think that, you know, it's good that there is the likes of here to do that, and the addiction centres that do that. I didn't know that necessarily. You know, I knew there was different types of, but what's really interesting the way you're incorporating the breathing work and even the taking of the cold water, the acupuncture, the yoga, the meditation.
Yeah, I mean, and even like how you say called metamorphosis as well. And sometimes, you know, a client will walk in and you just know they're just not. They're so distressed that they're really not going to get anywhere. So I just say, okay, we'll try something different. And the metamorphosis can be very relaxing. And then as they relax, then they start to talk. And sometimes when I've done that, they felt a lot freer, that they've said things that they've been wanting to say for a long time. So whatever happened within the process, I think it's just once they start to relax and they feel safe, I mean, you have to feel safe, obviously.
Any recent inspiring stories that kind of stick out in your mind to people who've really come from a low place?
Yeah, someone I saw today actually, she's doing absolutely amazing. Long history of drug use, again horrific abuse from a very, very young age, and she's now 2 years drug free.
Wow, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the stuff, do the stories like that empower you to keep going with your life? Would you say that this is your life purpose? Or would you even not think that deeply on it? Or would you think that this is something that you're good at, that you have your talent in, and you really enjoy doing?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in corporate. You know, I've done I had a different life. When I was doing that, there were a good few days I was dreading. You know, dreading going to work, but oh God, here we go again. No, I do. I love it. I love what I do. It doesn't feel like work at all. My board of directors tell me it's my vocation. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Your location.
My vocation.
Oh, your vocation.
Yeah, that's. But I thoroughly enjoy the work.
And it's interesting, even to. I know you're. There's a documentary coming out. It came out last week. I haven't got to see it yet though. It was about NDEs, or near-death experiences.
Okay.
And you know, this is the type of thing where people believe, you know, they might clinically die on the table.
Yes.
And come back, and their brain structure is altered, or they're in a different frame of mind. And they often talk about, you know, you hear this common thing of a life review scenario that they believe they went through, and the question comes, what did you do for your fellow man when you're on Earth? And it makes me think lately, you know, is that the purpose? If you're religiously inclined, is that your main purpose? Is that all our main purposes? To get up in the morning and think, what can we do to make someone else's life a bit better collectively?
Oh, nice, isn't it?
Yeah, but it seems as though that's exactly what you're doing. As opposed to, and not running down anyone who's throwing bricks up on a wall or anything like that, but what I mean is that I think here's an idea that we can all do an expedient job, but I think that we all have maybe the genetic, maybe it's talents, maybe it's interests to help others. Like some people want to be ambulance drivers. Yeah. Some people really want to be firemen. Some people want to be surgeons, and some people who can't stand blood. Yeah. But there's people who want to do these tough jobs with tough scenarios, and we've enough people, well, in general, that can fill them roles. And it's interesting to me, you know, if we were to think of humans as animals, we'd all be kind of predisposed to just getting our few, you know, a bit of food and getting our security and building our walls. But there is people, like, I think that everyone has that purpose. If they say there's two sides of the brain, one is all logic and one is two hemispheres, I think they call it, and one is your artistic, your creative, your spiritual end of it. And when I think today's society has us all living in the left logical side, a lot of us, But when we dive into their talents on the other side and what we really want to be doing with our life, we can live in the middle. And some people maybe are lost if they go too far to the right, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that if we didn't have to go to work and weren't so busy all the time, and we're addicted to being busy, I think I am as well.
Yeah, but if you're busy, you're not present, you're not feeling.
Yes.
You're distracted from
Yes,
yourself.
that's exactly, you're distracted.
Mm.
And you never really figure out, I think that, I've spent a few years being distracted and not knowing what I want to do or what I could do to help others. Like you could have stayed in the corporate world and being distracted and being stressed but maybe making good money, and that's the way we go until we burn out.
Mm-hmm.
But you did pull back from that and you followed, maybe it was a calling, but maybe it was just something that...
I was very resistant now.
Very resistant, yeah. But he got a few signs like, no, get out of that car,
Exactly. I mean, if you'd said to me that I was in my 20s, I'd be doing this, I would have said no. Not a hope.
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it?
And not because I think there's anything wrong with it. I don't know. I would have thought of it maybe then as being a very challenging job. I don't know, but I didn't. I wouldn't. I wouldn't have seen that I'd be doing this now.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have on my life path at the time.
Yeah.
But it must have been somewhere that the fact that I had started going with the reflexology, I started going down the holistic route. So maybe it was there.
Anyone in your lineage who would have been helping others in a holistic way, or parents, aunties, grandparents?
My grandmother was with the Red Cross.
Was she?
Yeah, she was with the Red Cross. And then I had another aunt. She worked in the hospital. She was like a carer, I think we call it. Yeah. So yeah. Other than that, no.
It's interesting that it's developing as well and bringing in more things to your community centre as well. So I know when you launched with COVID on it, that must have been a real hit.
Well, see, I had already, I suppose, established myself because I was there from 2015.
Yeah.
So people knew who I was at this point. So I would have had quite a large client base. But it was mainly, I think my board worked out, I don't know, it's like crazy, like 70,000 or whatever free counselling hours. So clearly there was a need.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose it had grown so organically that not that I wanted to leave, but it was like, well, what are you doing now? Yeah. So it was a very organic process.
Yeah.
And then Willow just kind of grew from there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like it naturally grew. Yeah, like you said, you didn't have to advertise in that regard.
No, and I never set out to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, to run the centre and everything, I was just going to do a bit of counselling here and there. Raise my children who are now fully grown. And yeah, it was just been a very organic process, really.
I want to just pull you back to something for a moment. You talking about the car and the electricity things. In your mind, is it pure coincidence that you walked out of the car? What's it down to that people were stunned that you walked away and your daughter?
I mean, I'm not trying to understand the question, but it was just the state of the car. What do you mean?
Yeah, so do you think, do you walk away without being harmed from that?
Yeah, completely.
And do you think that's just pure chance?
No, I don't actually. No, I don't. Someone was looking after me. But no, I do believe there's something greater than myself. Yeah, definitely.
Begs the question, did you have more work to do here? And, the likes of the person you met today, their life has changed through your community centre.
I think I had, to be honest, I had more work to do on myself initially.
Yeah.
And that was the great thing with Daphne and the Rape Crisis Centre in the first year. It was not purely, but primarily personal development and working on yourself. I mean, had I had No, I'd never had counselling or anything prior to the car accident. And then, yeah, I
So
think...
you knew where trauma really came from before you even went into addiction,
So,
you understood the depths of trauma
yeah.
through that before you went into the addiction.
Oh, completely, yeah. Because it was just such a natural step, because there was so much trauma. The trauma was leading to the addiction that they went hand in hand.
It's interesting you're saying, working on yourself before you could do that. I've heard that, they say that the best way to fix society is to work on yourself and expand that. So to work on your house, get your affairs in order, get your life, because we shouldn't, people throwing stones from glass houses, this kind of idea. Get your house in order before you criticise the world is a saying, and then we can work outwards.
Yeah, I think, well, for myself, the more work I do on myself, the better therapist I am. 100%.
So you need to take that time. Do you set aside that time for yourself to do your meditation or to do your routines?
Yeah, I would have been, obviously you have to do therapy as part of your training, but then I would have gone back into therapy, I suppose as things come up inside you, you either work through them or you avoid them, but how can I avoid them and then expect someone else to work through them with me? And I don't know, I kind of believe that I can only take someone as far as I've been myself. So if I don't know myself, how can I work with anybody?
Does that push you to challenge yourself on any adverse situations that come up in your life because you want to get through it so you can help others do the same? Do you see it as a...
No, I see it's for myself primarily, because if I know me, well, it's going to make my life easier moving forward. And then absolutely, it does impact my work. But I suppose, the better we know ourselves, the easier our life is, really, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. Look, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much.
It has gotten quite cold in here, I've noticed.
No, I'm not too bad,
You're not
actually.
too bad. Maybe it's the start. We're ready for winter. I'm trying to get my cold therapy in here in the corner. It's going to be a better person after this podcast. And I really appreciate it. And thanks very much for coming on. And I think that what's happening there is great. And I must visit and take a look.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, I should, because I know it's surprising that when we came here for the open day and my mother was here and she says, I know, Sharon,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, we will do that.
I love it, because we did have Ivana Bakic came down and we had a great time and she met clients and it was great now, to be fair.
Yeah.
And it really gave her an understanding of the work that we're doing. Yeah, so please come and visit us.
I will do. Great stuff. Okay.
Thanks, Anthony.